Well, hi everyone. I'm John Ritland, and this is a video about one of my favorite feuds from the Attitude Era, the Triple H Mick Foley one. And this took place over multiple years, but why am I doing this video now, you might be asking? Well, we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of when Mick Foley and Triple H had their infamous Hell in a Cell match, title versus career, and Mick Foley lost and had to retire for 4 weeks and then come back for WrestleMania 2000, even though he was determined to stay retired, or at least retire for quite a while. But he went to the Terry Funk School of Retirement and he's come back multiple times. But anyway, I digress. That's not what this video is about. I really enjoyed this feud because the promos, the matches, over a period of years, it was like, it wasn't just in like 2000, like 99, 2000. They had great matches in 97. They had other interactions in 1999. There was a lot of really good stuff in this feud, and Triple H was basically made by Mick Foley. I mean, he was made by others, and Triple H did put in the work. Do not misunderstand. But Mick Foley got Triple H over a ton. But to understand why this is one of my favorite feuds, you have to go back and look at the history. And I'm not talking about going back to when Mick Foley first started out and worked in Dallas and worked in other areas. I'm not talking about when Triple H started working on the Indies when he debuted in 1991-92. I'm talking about when they went to WCW. Mick Foley had already been established in WCW before. He wrestled there for a bit, had a match with Mil Mascaras at Clash of Champions 10. I recently did a review of that. You can check out the Old School Wrestling Reviews playlist to see what I thought of that match. But Foley then would leave and would go out, do some more work and then come back in a better spot in WCW. And then by, late 93, he was feuding with Vader, an incredible match at Halloween Havoc 99, very bloody, very violent. But by 94, he was teaming with Max Payne in Spring Stampede 1994. He was tag team champions briefly with Kevin Sullivan. And then I believe lost them to Orndorff and Roma, Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma at Bash at the Beach 94. And then after that, Mick Foley pretty much faded away from WCW. He turned down a contract and he went off and was doing some stuff in Japan again. I mean, he was still doing stuff in Japan anyway, but he was doing some more stuff there, wrestling Terry Funk. And then would be in ECW for a while. Now, all this time, Triple H had gotten into WCW and was there on, I think he was there on a year contract. He would wrestle on WCW Saturday night. Since they did not have Nitro at the time, Nitro would not be around for quite a while, and I will be doing a retro review of that one as well. The first Nitro, that is, in September, because, boy, what a hell of a moment that was. But Triple H was finding his footing, and he was John Pierre Lafayette. I mean, not Lafayette, but you get the whole point. It was a silly name and everything, and they tried to make him a French guy, and it didn't work at all because nobody fucking bought it. But he was teaming with William Regal, who was Lord Steven Regal at the time. And everything seemed to be going, well, okay, maybe they're going to finally do something with him. But yeah, the weird French thing was just absolutely ridiculous. And he faced off against Alex Wright, Triple H did, or Jean, and he faced off against him at Starrcade 94 and lost because they were determined to push Alex Wright, despite all evidence to the contrary that he wasn't fucking ready, despite the fact that Alex Wright was very talented. At this time, his contract was coming up, and he decided to leave. Regal even encouraged him to go, apparently in interviews, apparently encouraged him to go. So, while Mick Foley was in ECW, tearing it up, doing some great stuff, getting upset at the fans for the whole Kane Dewey thing, referencing Foley's younger, youngest son, I believe youngest son at the time, because I think he has 3 kids. But anyway, he's doing all that stuff. Triple H, was in WCW, and then, got brought into WWE as the Blue Blood, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, feuded with Henry Godwin, and did that stuff, and then got squashed by the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 12. Also had a good performance in the 1996 Rumble. Pretty damn good performance, actually. On par with what Ted DiBiase did in 1990. I mean, not quite the same because there were 2-minute intervals in that one, and then 90-second intervals in the 96 one, but still, Triple H had a good showing. Mick Foley, at this time, was just finishing up in WCW, and then showed up after the night after WrestleMania 12, attacking The Undertaker. And then that would start that feud. What was actually really good at that time is they kept having unique matches and everything, and I'll come back to that in just a bit. But Triple H seemed to be pegged as the guy that they were going to push. And then, unfortunately, the curtain call happened. For those unfamiliar, here's a brief rundown of the curtain call. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon and Diesel were leaving. and they had given their notice, and Madison Square Garden was going to be the final show. A house show at the Madison Square Garden was going, the Hallowed Halls was going to be their final WWE appearance for a number of years. They would actually come back in 2002. Nash for a little bit longer than Hall, but that's another story for another day. With this, Shawn Michaels was out there. He was champion at the time. Triple H was out there. Now, the thing is, this is baby faces and heels getting together when kayfabe was kind of still seen as something, even though people already knew it was pretty much a work. Vince had kind of blown the doors off of that. But Vince was still upset because he got a lot of backlash from a lot of the agents. So, couldn't punish Diesel, couldn't punish Razor. I mean, you could have fined him if you wanted to, but they were leaving. Couldn't punish Shawn. Shawn was a champion. So it all came down to Triple H. Triple H was earmarked to win the King of the Ring tournament. That was out the door. And he basically got buried, essentially. He got beat up a lot. He got beat in a lot of matches. I think he got beat by Sid in a IC title tournament match in September of 96. It was late September, early October. I think it was late September. And just that kind of stuff, just got absolutely eaten alive. I do recall seeing the match, even if I can't recall the exact timeline, but my God, he just got absolutely destroyed. And all this time, Mick Foley is feuding with The Undertaker. So Triple H is down here in the dumps. Mick Foley, as Mankind, is feuding with The Undertaker, having a great match at King of the Ring, and other stuff, even beating The Undertaker, and because Paul Bearer accidentally caused The Undertaker to lose, not meaning to. And then they had their infamous Boiler Room Brawl at SummerSlam 1996, which was an incredible match. And then Paul Bearer turned on Mankind, and Mankind got the win over Undertaker, because they had to fight out of the Boiler Room, and whoever got to the ring, got to the urn, got the victory. But Paul Bearer was like taking it away from the Undertaker, so that split them off. And until a couple years later, when they reformed for absolutely no reason, because fuck logic. But Mick Foley would then take that momentum, have an incredible match against Shawn Michaels at Mind Games the following month. And then meanwhile, Triple H is still kind of here. And after a number of months, they had kind of gotten over that. And while Mick Foley was continuing his feud with The Undertaker, and even having a great match at Survivor Series 1996, where I believe Paul Bearer was suspended in a cage. Great match. Check that out. Check out that pay-per-view if you haven't. Pay-per-view is absolutely great. I mean, even the worst match is still not that bad. That's a great Survivor Series. And that match stood out. And this was on a card where Shawn took on Sid. Rock had his debut. And you had various others. You had Goldust, putting over Rock. You had a lot of good stuff. Even the worst elimination match wasn't really all that much. You had Austin versus Brett, which was a great standout match and would push the rivalry even more. Like, I might even do a reflection on that feud at some point. That was a great feud, even though it didn't last beyond like a year, like barely a year, but it was still fucking great. So Mankind kind of doing his own thing right there. Triple H, meanwhile, would capture the Intercontinental Championship from Marvelous Mark Merrow, who had only held it for a little bit. Mr. Perfect would cause a whole turn and everything, and Triple H would win the Intercontinental Championship. So then Mr. Perfect went back to being Curt Hennig and went to WCW a number of months later. Triple H had his valets with him. Even at one point, Sable was his valet. He had Ode to Joy as his theme, and he had Curtis Hughes as his bodyguard. So all this is going on. They're building up. They're fine. Triple H ate his shit and ate his crow and had to learn to like it. And then they build up this feud that he had with Goldust, which was a great feud. And going into, and I'm going somewhere with this with all the history. He feuded with Goldust, even feuded with him into WrestleMania 13. And Mankind, meanwhile, was had a brief skirmish with Terry Funk at the Royal Rumble 97. Then would team with Vader, longtime rivals, to face off against Owen and Bulldog at Mania 13 for the tag titles. And they didn't win them, but they would still team up a little bit and stuff like that. And then that would kind of separate because WWE lost faith in Vader. I can't imagine that whole interview where he slapped around that journalist, and I believe it was Kuwait, could have had anything to do with it. But I don't blame Vader because, quite frankly, the guy was being a jackass. So, moving on from that, though. During this time, they started to clash, Triple H and Mick Foley. They clashed at King of the Ring 97 in the finals. I remember not really caring for the match, and I have seen it recently. I still don't care all that much for it overall. I felt it went on a little bit too long, even though I liked that the finals went on a bit. to establish, hey, both these guys, there's a reason why both these guys are in the finals. This one dragged a little bit. There was a vicious pedigree at one point, and Triple H would win. So after not winning the, King of the Ring tournament the year before, he got anointed here. And him and Foley would continue their feud. So clearly now they had realized, hey, Triple H did what he did, and he felt bad for it. I don't think he felt bad for it, honestly, but he probably made the company feel that way. To be fair, your opinions of the curtain call are yours and yours alone. I understand why Vince got upset. I personally didn't mind it as much because we already knew that these guys were friends anyway. And sure, it could be insulting to some fans, and it's cool that the video is out there, shaky fan cam footage because it was a house show, but they snuck a camera in there. This is back before security apparently learned to do their fucking job. But hey, we got to see it, so it's really, really cool. So, after Triple H won the King of the Ring, they're building him up and everything. They continued this feud into SummerSlam 97. They had a great cage match where Chyna made her presence known, slamming the door in Foley's face. And he even got to simulate sort of what Jimmy Snuka did, since Jimmy Snuka's jump off the cage is what inspired Mick Foley to get into wrestling, or one of the things. He did that and did a great elbow drop on Triple H. And he got over the top. And okay, so yeah, now they're 1-1. What in the world's going to happen? Because they're clearly pegging Triple H for some big things. Then they have, it's the September 22nd, 1997 edition of Raw at Madison Square Garden. Triple H is in the ring. He's going to face Mankind. Or he's going to face Dude Love. Now he doesn't face Dude Love. But then here's Mankind. Oh no, he's not going to face him. And that because the Dude Love character is something that they had introduced at this point with Foley. He'd been introduced a bit ago, like during the summer. And so they had, Dude Love's, Love Shack or whatever, the baby Love Shack. And he's talking and everything. And they're talking about, oh, well, somebody is going to hurt him even worse than I could. And suddenly, Cactus Jack debuts in WWE. Crowd goes absolutely insane, despite Kevin Dunn saying nobody's going to know who Cactus Jack is. Kevin Dunn proving he's a fucking idiot that should have been fired from the company years ago. But enough of that. They had an incredible match, especially for TV. Falls Count Anywhere, just tables, all this stuff, all this weaponry. I'm not the biggest fan of hardcore stuff, but they made it work. After that, though, things kind of cooled off on their feud. And they would still, go do their own separate things. Mankind would kind of fade away a bit. I mean, he would feud with Kane. He did the Three Faces of Foley thing at the Rumble, at the 98 Rumble. And then, again, wasn't really doing all that much. He would team with Chainsaw Charlie, Terry Funk, and beat the New Age Outlaws in a dumpster match at WrestleMania 14. All the while, Triple H was feuding with Owen Hart over the European Championship. Triple H had won it at the Christmas edition of Raw, or just before Christmas, I believe, in a match where Shawn Michaels basically defended it by not defending it and laying down for Triple H, and they made it a big deal and everything, like it was an exhausting match. And people say, oh, it was just as bad as a finger poke of doom. No, the European Championship didn't mean anything at that point, no matter how much British Bulldog tried to establish it. So, after this, they go do their own feuds. Triple H's kind of being built up and everything. He's feuding with The Rock. Some great matches. They had a 2 3 falls match fully loaded. They had a great ladder match at SummerSlam 98 for the Intercontinental Championship. Triple H would suffer an injury after winning that match and would have to relinquish it, which is why Ken Shamrock became Intercontinental Champion afterwards. Mankind had that Hell in a Cell match, yes, that Hell in a Cell match against Undertaker, and then subsequently lost, basically all feeling in his body. I don't know how the hell he survived that, by the way, but then he kind of went more of a comedy route. He would team with Kane and then not do much with Kane, and they were kind of using Foley a little less, probably to give him a chance to let his body heal. And, they were using him on pay-per-view still. He had a great match. I believe it was at Unforgiven 98, I believe. It was him, Rock, and Shamrock in a cage match for the WWE, not the WWE, it was the Intercontinental Championship. Might even been for the WWE Championship. I'm kind of forgetting my timeline here because Rock wasn't champion yet, and so they just had a great cage match and stuff like that. And Triple H is, firing along and everything. He had that injury, so he's out for a bit. Mankind is building up some more stuff. Got screwed over at Survivor Series in the Deadly Game tournament where they recreated the screw job a year later, and Rock was anointed the corporate champion after turning against the McMahons just a bit before. So, then we go into the Rock Mankind rivalry, which was a great rivalry. And Triple H and DX even helping, Mankind win the championship at the January 4th, 1999 edition of Raw, which did put butts in seats. That's not a knock against Tony Schiavone. It's a knock against whoever told him to say that. Probably Bischoff or probably some idiot. So I'm not going to say Bischoff because Bischoff is a lot of things. I don't think he's an idiot. So with this, you got Mankind didn't hold the championship for long. Triple H kind of floated around the mid card a little bit. And then him and China, he had that feud with Kane, and it was about China getting her face burned, and then he turned heel and joined the corporate ministry, which made absolutely no goddamn sense. And all the while this is going on, where Mankind was champion, and then he was kind of just here and here, and then it goes to SummerSlam 1999, and about 2 years after they had that incredible cage match, or actually 2 years afterwards. Steve Austin versus Triple H was meant to be the match. It was supposed to be Steve Austin possibly versus China, and then they switched that around. Would have been interesting to see China win the championship. It would have been better than the other, the racist woman that they have as champion in Impact currently, but another story for another day. It ended up being Austin and Triple H with Mankind involved. The reason is, Austin did not feel that Triple H was worthy of beating him. So Austin, playing favorites there. Not that Triple H would be, Triple H was anybody that wouldn't play politics, but that could be a long goddamn list if we really go into it. So Mankind ends up winning the championship, loses it to Triple H the next day, and all the while they're building up more of this stuff. Really, really good stuff here. Triple H wins the championship, loses it to Vince McMahon. Mankind's kind of, just doing his own thing, teams up with The Rock. They're doing all this stuff, and I'm going somewhere with this because you got to build up the history. You got to build up all the stuff, and then you go to just after Survivor Series 99, where Triple H loses the championship to Big Show. Mankind gets fired by the McMahon-Helmsley regime, and then Rock stages a possible walkout unless, they get back. Unless they get back with them. Like, hey, you're going to bring him back, and you're going to do this. And Mankind says, well, I want a match with you. And then he has a match where he got the shit beat out of him. He got pedigreed through the announcer's table. And there's other stuff that happened before this, but not really all that important. Rock and Sock Connection was great. Triple H was being built as the main eventer and he was already, by the end of 99, a two-time champion. That's when they were hot potatoing the championship around a little bit too much. And you can check out, I believe it's on my rants list, the 1999 WWE title picture. It was a mess. It was a goddamn mess, but I feel I captured that pretty well. So we're going to all of this. Triple H lays out Mankind, and Mankind says, well, the one thing I'm not, and on the following SmackDown, he says, the one thing that Mankind is not ready to do is, face you in a street fight at the Royal Rumble. And I'm getting goosebumps about it because I just remember it's like, Triple H is like just looking all smug and everything, but there's somebody I know who is. He takes off the mask, he takes off the, the button-up shirt that he has, the dress shirt, and it's a Cactus Jack shirt. And Triple H sells it really goddamn well. And then you have that match. You have that great match at Royal Rumble. And it was a great build. They really had it where it was going to be just a street fight, whatever, just blood and guts and stuff like that. And they captured that pretty damn well. Triple H got his leg gouged on a wooden pallet. And credit to him because he was working with wood in his goddamn leg. That had to have hurt like a goddamn bitch. And did a whole bunch of other stuff. They did chair shots. They did, they did bats. They did thumbtacks, this frickin', backdrop on the thumbtacks, and then a pedigree on the thumbtacks. Ouch. The match is great. If you haven't had a chance to check out that Royal Rumble in particular, the undercard's a lot better than the Rumble, but that match stood out. It was a goddamn good match. And really cemented how good this feud could be. Because you look back at 1997 when they had that great trilogy of matches. 99 they had matches weren't as good, maybe because Mick Foley had destroyed his body completely. And then you have the culmination here where Triple H was rising up as the guy. Mick Foley knew that he was done. He knew that he was having memory issues and everything. Vince McMahon apparently said, well, you just had your last match. And he wasn't wrestling on house shows. He was making appearances, but he wasn't taking any bumps. After that match where he got pedigreed on Raw through the announcer's table, then they did the whole build. That match right there could have been it. Because, yes, Mick Foley lost. And then he laid out Triple H, beating him up on the stretcher and stuff like that. So, obviously, this feud was going to continue. So, Mick Foley lost. And the idea was like, hey, wait a second, like I want another crack at it. And Stephanie's like, well, you lost, this kind of stuff. And the McMahon Helmsley regime was thankfully the only time we had to see it on TV until later. So we then do the build for No Way Out. Mick Foley puts his career on the line. Triple H says, okay, and it's going to be Hell in a Cell. So, okay, you got Mick Foley's match, except for the fact that he lost against The Undertaker, and then he lost, and then there was a segment match where he got the shit beat out of him as well. There was a lot to this where it's like, oh, it's Mick Foley's match, and yeah, he had brutality in it, but he always lost. So we have this match, great goddamn match. They're inside the cage. How the hell are they going to get outside the cage? And then a hole gets, ripped through the cage wall. They're fighting and everything. Mick Foley has the barbed wire bat. Well, the 2x4 wrapped in barbed wire. There's clearly lighter fluid on. He lights it on fire. He goes to hit Triple H. He does some stuff. They do, the whole stuff on the cage. And then all of a sudden, they do a backdrop. Foley falls through the cage roof, which was planned this time, and impacts through the ring. I hope that was gimmicked, because if it wasn't gimmicked, goddamn, I don't know how the fuck Foley's walking. So Triple H gets down. Foley starts twitching, like getting back up and everything. Gets pedigreed. 1, 2, 3. So that's the end of the feud, essentially. I mean, did a little bit of an epilogue here, and then I'll finish up. But those two matches cemented Foley as somebody that could make stars, and also Triple H as being a pretty big star. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Triple H in the ring, and felt that he was always the type that could work with the top guy, but could never be the top guy. At this point, I gotta say he was pretty damn good. Now, there were times where he stayed on top a little bit too long, but yeah, that's another video for another day on that. This feud, all the way from the WCW days where they never crossed paths, to the stuff they did in between, Triple H starting in WWE first, the feud that they had in 97, and all the stuff that they did, built all the way to the end of this. And then Foley would come back and be part of the four-way with the McMahon every corner, Triple H with Stephanie, Linda with Mick Foley, Vince McMahon in The Rock's corner. That backfired. Shane McMahon in the Big Show's corner. And Foley, despite only being gone for a few weeks, had put on quite a bit of weight because he was retired and he cut his hair. And then did the stuff, and it didn't work all that well. So really, you got to kind of just look at No Way Out being the end of it. And then they did Commissioner Foley stuff, and he had interactions with Triple H. And they kept hinting at that stuff. Thankfully, Foley did not come back to face Triple H at any point, though he did have interactions with him at Bad Blood 2003 when Triple H took on Kevin Nash. But the reason that rivalry is just one of my favorites is for this reason. It felt real. And I know that sounds kind of silly. You could tell they were cooperating, but they made it feel like it actually was, these guys in a goddamn blood feud. 97, parts of 99, summer 99, fall 99. And then that ending stuff from, the end of 99 into the early parts of 2000. Everything about that worked really well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little history lesson. It's just my interpretation of the events. I want you to know that I appreciate any comments you guys have to say. And let me know if there's other stuff you want me to talk about, like other rivalries and stuff like that. Now, keep in mind, it probably should be stuff from WWE, WCW. You could do stuff from Impact if you really, really want me to. But I'm open to suggestions. I just can't promise I can get to all this stuff. But try to make sure it's on like a 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30 year, curve, like this year. It happened this time 35 something years ago. But anyway, agree, disagree with what I said. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.